Could you build a business that's better for our planet? That's what I have set out to answer. Hi, I'm Marco Pimentel, marketing expert and entrepreneur, and host of the podcast Someone Like You. I become fascinated in finding creative climate solutions in business, and on the podcast, I break down how founders and CEOs are building climate-friendly business solutions that are opportunities for growth while being better for the planet.
We want to just plant a seed that, hey, maybe there's something different you could do. And maybe it's not today, but at some point, you're going to go down into the basement. There's going to be a blinking light or a strange noise, and you're going to call someone, and he's going to tell you, yeah, I think this unit's got another 3, maybe 2 years in it. And that's when we want folks to call us.
24% of our total greenhouse gas emissions come from the use of natural gas, both from industrial processes but also in our home. Today's guest is Michael Sachse. He's the CEO of Dandelion Energy, a geothermal heating company which has developed a scalable model for deploying residential geothermal heating and cooling to displace natural gas and heating oil. Michael grew up in Washington, D.C., and soon after working as a lawyer, knew that he wanted to create an impact on the planet beyond the walls of his law firm. I get to speak with Michael on the difference between hot rocks geothermal found in countries like Iceland and the geothermal energy Dandelion Energy provides, what setting up access to geothermal would look like in your own home, and the tremendous government subsidies that are available for those who make the switch. With a growing customer base in the U.S. Northeast and an expansion to the Mountain West and beyond, Dandelion Energy is leading the way towards geothermal energy for all. I wanted to take a second to tell you about our Season 2 sponsor, Digital Scope. Did you know your website has a carbon footprint? Well, digital technology has a larger carbon footprint than the entire aviation industry, and it's only getting bigger. Digital power consumption is increasing by 9% every year. At this rate, our digital carbon footprint could be responsible for as much as 14% of global emissions by 2040. If you're a digital-first company, or really any company with a website, and want to understand the impact your website is having on the environment, Digital Scope can translate visitor data into carbon measurement, all with a simple one line of code added to your website. Check out digitalscope.com/someonelikeyu. The first 100 people to sign up get free access for an entire year. Michael, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here.
Love to begin on your background and if there is any correlation in the past to climate or sustainability that led you to Dandelion Energy.
Yeah, I have, I think, an unusual background, one I'm proud of, but not the typical path. So I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I became, like many kids growing up in Washington, D.C., a lawyer. So I went to law school. And after working at a law firm for a little while, I was like, this is not going to be my future. I ended up getting connected to a political campaign where I ran communications. That was for Jim Himes, who's now in Congress. That was in 2008, and I loved it. And I learned that I wanted a job where I would have enough rope to hang myself, and I'd have to figure it out. And shortly after that, I got an email from some friends who were starting a company, needed someone to do energy regulatory work for them. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about energy. I don't know anything about regulation. But I'm excited about what you're doing. And that company ended up being O-Power, which we took public in 2014, sold to Oracle in 2016. So I got to have a terrific run there on the management team. After that, I joined New Enterprise Associates as an entrepreneur in residence. I did a brief stint as a CEO of a data company, and before getting recruited over to Dandelion in 2020. And I love this space because I never grew up wanting to make money. I wanted to have an impact, and I really care about about the planet, which may sound a little naive to say, but also I love business. I love the variety of questions and the challenges, and climate isn't easy, but it's fun.
And I'm excited to talk to you about geothermal. My family is from the Azores in Portugal. They used to cook food under the ground, and I had a townhouse that I used to own, and it was geothermal as well, which was which was neat on the west coast of Canada. It was kind of like this interesting townhouse development that was built. So before we kind of get into geothermal and what Dandelion does, like how did the idea of Dandelion come up? Because if I think about geothermal, like it's existed, and what is kind of Dandelion trying to do to disrupt? I guess two sides. Disrupt how geothermal gets installed into homes, and then obviously, of course, the energy side of people's homes, where it's still using oil, inefficiency with certain heat pumps for both heating and cooling. So we'll get into those. But how did that come to be?
Well, first, Marco, I love that you know about it and have experience with it. It's not everyone who can say that. But we were born inside Google X, and Kathy, our founder, really started working on Dandelion within Google and was very focused on the problem of sustainable heat. When we look at building emissions, about 20% of emissions come from heating. That's because for the most part, we burn something to heat our homes. We burn natural gas, we burn fuel oil. And so it seemed like there was this technology, geothermal, which is clearly the most efficient, but just hadn't scaled. And so the focus of Dandelion has from the start been to scale geothermal. And really, the thought has been on a couple of fronts. One, we need to make it easy for customers because you essentially have two trades you need to bring together, folks working inside the home and folks working outside the home. Second, you need to bring financing to bear so that people can pay for the benefits in line with when they're realizing them. I may have said two thoughts, but there are three. And then third, you need to use technology and data to make it more affordable and travel down the cost curve. And really, that's what we've been working on.
Yeah, and I actually just had somebody come to my house to service our furnace, and I always just use our heat pump for both heating and cooling. And again, west coast of Canada doesn't get as cold as other places. Mm-hmm. And the technician was like, "You have gas as a backup for your furnace. Like, what are you doing? Like, once it gets to 0 degrees Celsius, like use gas. Don't use electricity because it's way more efficient." So, I think that people just assume we can run heat pumps for both heating and cooling, but really when it comes especially to heating, there's other ways that could do that. So Dandelion is trying to bring what would be, would you compare it to the challenge of just a small kind of operator that's doing local geothermal and trying to build in, this financing option to make it easier for customers, and also trying to bring it into a little bit more of a seamless, like, how would the experience to a customer be different than if somebody were to come by their house and said, "Well, I have a team of 10 people. I've been putting geothermal in for 5 years." Like, what was the big brand leap and the big difference with Dandelion comparatively to the smaller, local type of businesses?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First is scale. So there are smaller businesses that do it, but generally they're doing only one part of the equation. Sure, we'll come and drill for you. We'll put the ground loops in, but you got to find someone to put the heat pump in. Or sure, we can take care of the heat pump, but we're going to have to find a subcontractor for drilling. And we wanted to make it so that the customer just had one number to call, one throat to choke. They could do everything with us, and we could make it really simple. The financing, as you alluded to, is important too, because that expands the market and allows more people who may not have the cash lying around to jump on the bandwagon here. And then, I'd say that the third thing is being able to access more homes. So, what a lot of the existing infrastructure was doing was they were using traditional water well rigs, which work just fine, but they're really big and they can only access certain homes. We use much smaller equipment because the only thing we're interested in doing is installing geothermal for people. And that allows us to just serve a bunch of homes that literally most existing contractors can't reach.
And so this idea to reach obviously scale in a way that has never been done before. You born in Google X, what was the kind of initial go to market, and how did that begin once it moved out?
Yeah, so the initial go-to-market was, let's see if people will buy this, and if they will trust a company that is more of a startup in this space rather than an existing contractor. So we went to farmers markets, talked to people, and found incredible demand. We found that people were really hungry for a solution, and that in particular in the Northeast, where you have millions of customers using fuel oil for heat, that they were desperate to get off of it. And so once we saw that, then we realized, look, we can start to hire up. We can bring capital to bear. We can bring technology to work. One of the biggest costs in geothermal is the cost of drilling and putting in the ground loop. And those systems tend to be wildly oversized because the traditional installers doing the right thing, they didn't know what was under the ground, so they would just design to the worst case scenario, which might mean that you would have 200 feet of ground loop per ton of heating capacity. In our case, we have data that we've carefully both digitized, acquired, and now generated ourselves. And we're able to precision design these systems, which allows us to do about 108 feet of ground loop per ton of heating capacity. So our drilling costs are much lower as a result, which obviously means that the value prop for the customer is better.
And so for a consumer that's thinking about geothermal, and like you said, is the overwhelming just they don't want fuel because of the environmental reasons plus costs? Like what have you been hearing from the individual consumers about why they want to switch?
Yeah, we think of it as being very similar to buying an electric vehicle. So, most people, if you just bought a new combustion vehicle, you're probably not going to switch to electric. But if you get to a point where you're like, I don't know how many more years this car is going to be with me, and you get ready to make a choice, and cost is a part of it, sustainability is a part of it, the experience is a part of it. And it's exactly the same for us. So what we see is that we have to have an economic equation that makes sense for customers. And most of our customers are going to see a 7 to 9 year payback, which is very similar to residential solar. And that means that they're going to pay the same or less if they finance as what they're spending today. And that's the box we have to check. They have to have an economic equation that makes sense. And that unlocks the other motivations they're bringing. Then the sustainability motivation can be unlocked, or maybe it's a health and safety motivation. Maybe it's that they don't want the extra space of an air handler in their backyard. That too. So whatever. If once the economic value prop is there, then we can really have the conversations that consumers want to have, which is around making their home a more comfortable and place that they're proud of.
And I guess if for the majority now, when you install geothermal, do you need a backup source of heat or cooling for whatever reason?
No, and maybe I should just take a second because Margot, I know but for the audience, just to explain. So, what a geothermal system is, it's really got two parts. It's got a ground loop that's buried in the yard underground, and it's got a heat pump, in this case a ground source heat pump, that's wherever your furnace used to be. And it provides heat in the wintertime and it can cool in the summertime. And the key advantage it has is that the ground loop undergoes a passive heat exchange with the ground. The ground is on average about 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And in the wintertime, that is a boost to heating. And in the summertime, that augments cooling. And so the key thing then is that you're seeing a lot less variation in temperature between the lows outside and the temperature the ground loop is experiencing. So on a really cold winter day, it could be, in the Northeast where we're operating, 10 degrees at night Fahrenheit. So I don't know, I would guess, -7, -8 Celsius. And that difference to get up to room temperature, you're looking at needing to heat the air up almost 100 degrees. Whereas with the ground loop, that delta is much less, which means that no matter how cold it gets, you're still going to be able to heat the home, and the same is true in the summertime. You do need electricity. You're not 100% off the grid because the heat pump runs off electricity, but presumably most homes are going to have electricity anyhow.
Yeah, so you need to have electricity, but you don't need an additional source of heat or cooling with the system. And I guess the big thing for a lot of people is it's basically, similar to solar, where you have energy independence. Obviously, with solar, you are generating your own electricity to power and to heat, to cool, whatever you're doing as well. But what's you're talking about Northeast, I'm West Coast of Canada. I think a lot of people think about geothermal and their mind comes to pipes in the ground in Iceland or something, right? Like how can this be, is there geographic restrictions?
No, so there are no geographic restrictions, and I think it's you're right to point out there are two things that are called geothermal, but they're pretty different. So one version is in the industry kind of called hot rocks geothermal, where you're drilling very deep, looking for a steam pocket. That steam pocket is going to spin a turbine, and you're going to get renewable power. We love that. It's fantastic. It's more akin to what they're doing in Iceland, but it's very different from what we're doing. What we're doing is totally passive. So it's just about the fact that once you get about 4 feet below the surface, the ground temperature doesn't change very much. And that's true everywhere. You get some variations around ground conductivity. You get some variations around how much you need it. So like, for instance, the value for someone, let's say in Southern California, where it's never really going to get that cold, and it's also probably not going to get that hot, is going to be less than someone in a place like Minnesota, where you have a hot summer and a cold winter, and you're going to see a lot of benefit. Where you are, actually, there's been a lot of geothermal put in, and in general, anytime you have a big difference between winter lows and summer highs, you can see geothermal working really well.
So customers are obviously they're happy with this type of solution. There's not really been a business yet to figure out how to kind of scale this, and you're combining all these different features. How did you go about building the team? Like, is this something where you acquired existing companies that were in the space? Did you hire from the ground up, or did you do you partner with existing contractors and be the kind of the whole platform solution for the customer to make it seamless, and you deal with all of the logistics? Like, how did that start, and kind of how did you and what are you doing today?
Yeah, we've kind of done all those things, but yeah, I'll mention a few specifically. So, one, we've pulled a lot of people from the residential solar industry because, if you think about, a fairly a fairly meaningful piece of hardware that gets installed in a home that's energy related, that has various tax credits and utility incentives associated with it. The solar folks have dealt with all of that. And so, in particularly on the sales and marketing, but also on the operations side, we've had a lot of success with people out of that industry. Second, we definitely have worked with subcontractors, and that's something we try to be very careful with, because those subcontractors are representing our brand, and from the customer standpoint, they don't want us to point fingers and say no, they didn't do it right. It's all got to be a representation of Dandelion. So we're very picky about who we'll work with there, and then we've started also we have acquired a few companies to help give us skill and know-how. And then last, we've gotten really focused on hiring folks who are fantastic at managing things in the real world. And my background, I started off by saying I'm a lawyer by training. I've worked a long time in software. I've had to learn a lot about managing real world products and real world experiences for customers. And in my role, you get access to lots of incredible folks who can point you in the right direction. But we also try to bring in folks who've already learned those lessons and know how to operate in the world of atoms, not just electrons.
Mm-hmm. Every week on Someone Like You, we dive into stimulating conversations with founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and the likes who are consciously and successfully creating sustainable business solutions for the long haul. Tune in every week for a new inspiring conversation on leading climate solutions. And if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget, please subscribe on the platform of your choice and give us a rating and a review. And so all of these things, talk about acquisitions and hiring and partnering. These things cost a lot of money. So how has the business been funded to date? Through grants, government grants, or has it been through venture capital?
Yeah, so we've been able to raise VC dollars from terrific investors, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, NGP, Lennar, the largest home builder, NEA, Google Ventures, a number of others. And really, we are in the very fortunate position of having started early on a really big problem. And so we're hearing a lot about heat pumps these days, which is awesome. I love that. We've been working on heat pumps since before there was the same kind of conviction that this was the way to go. And so I think one of the things we've really benefited from is we have a big vision. We want to make heating and cooling sustainable for everybody. We want to do it by retrofitting homes and building new homes. We want to build hardware products and also bring finance products. And that does take capital. But the capital is there if the opportunity you're pursuing is big enough. And this is one of the biggest opportunities that's out there.
And when we talk about VC money, but I asked about grants, how does government funding come into play for the homeowner? Because the Inflation Reduction Act, and there's lots of state. I'm sure, like in Canada, there's a lot of grants. There's interest-free loans to do installs as well. So how does that play into it for the homeowner side? Because you had mentioned this saves you money from just switching from oil and current solutions, but there's also the benefit that obviously states and governments are looking to hyper growth this industry right now.
Oh, absolutely. So, so there are a few pieces to that. First, starting with the customer side, customers, this is a subsidized purchase for them. So we have utilities, which are using essentially state mandated dollars to supplement the cost of purchasing and installing a geothermal system. And then on top of that, customers are getting a 30% federal tax credit. So the amount of dollars that an individual customer is going to be out is about half of the total cost of the system. So tremendous government benefits available. On the company side, we've seen a lot of really important support as well, in particular with like workforce training grants, so that allow people to kind of apprentice, learn a new trade at about half cost. Those are really important for us, and we have at various points received small SBIR grants and things like that. But the truth is, most of the capital for the company has come via the venture community. But absolutely, for customers, there are a lot of government benefits that are available, and we help them with that.
Yeah, and you bring an interesting point about the trades, right? And there's been lots of reports that there's just not enough tradespeople, especially moving into the future. And at the same time, we have a massive energy transition that we need to accomplish, and how we build homes and everything, and an aging population. So it's kind of a bit of a perfect storm. So you talk about training. Is that part of the kind of overarching kind of strategy? Has it been hard to find talent on the trade side, and do you anticipate that being an important piece of your business moving forward?
So there have been times when it's been hard. We've gotten really pretty good at recruiting and training people. And the things we look for, we're not looking necessarily for folks who have years and years of experience. One of the things we're really eager to do is take people who may not have a ton of skills, but have the right attitude and the right aptitude, and put them to work, and put them with someone who's skilled. And one of the things that's most gratifying in the company is we see people every day, start with us at an entry salary, around 20, 22, $23 an hour, and work their way up that ladder so that they're making 35 or more. And for someone without a college degree, that's a six-figure salary. We haven't had trouble finding those folks. The part that is a little bit harder is the licensing, and that's something that that's that's a long story. I think that real licensing reform is needed because it's governed at too local a level and makes it too hard for people to demonstrate the skills that they're gaining. So I think we're making it harder on ourselves by putting some pretty ridiculous licensing challenges in front of us. But I think the people are there. We just have to have the growth mindset and get them in, get them trained. We've never had trouble attracting folks who want to get skills and want to build their market value.
From attracting talent to attracting customers, I'd love to just get into how the market's responded to Dandelion in terms of, like, I'm listening to this, I'm like, oh, I want this in my home now again. But how has the market responded? Because a lot of people listen to this show and are always wondering, if they're thinking about building in a climate space. Has the market been overwhelming in terms of the demand right away? Has it been hard to market to those customers? Like, how has that response been, and kind of what has Dandelion done to build up that demand?
Yeah, so we're in a very fortunate position. I'd never been in a company before where the biggest problem was meeting demand, but that is the problem we have. So we consistently sell. Maybe just to give some rough numbers, we sold. We installed about 500 homes last year, but we sold about 1,200 homes. So we're walking into this year with a very large backlog, and we'll have a similar dynamic this year. So the demand has been there, and honestly, what we've done has been fairly straightforward in a lot of ways. Like, most of our customers find us via Google or Facebook. We talk to them online, and then we send someone to the home to give them a firm price. But the biggest thing we've been trying to do is just raise awareness. We think most people don't know what geothermal is. When their furnace breaks, they just replace it with whatever was there before. And we want to just like plant a seed that, hey, maybe there's something different you could do. And maybe it's not today, but at some point, you're going to go down into the basement. There's going to be a blinking light or a strange noise, and you're going to call someone, and he's going to tell you, yeah, I think this unit's got another 3, maybe 2 years in it. And that's when we want folks to call us. And so we're just trying to get that little bit of mind share where it's going to take a while for them to get there, but we want them to start thinking about it. And we've been very lucky that, I think we're in the right place at the right time, and there's been a lot of attention, not just for us, but for heat pumps in general.
Yeah, and that gets into kind of the scale side of things. You have 500 installs and 1,200 for demand, and I'm sure that demand is just kind of continuing to grow. Where do you want to take Dandelion in terms of expansion and scale? Like, how is the plan to scale it across North America in licensed locations or partnerships? Like, how do you do this when it's like install by install?
Yeah. So I think it helps sometimes to just start with, the size of the market because for us, so our average sales price is about $50,000. So, the customer is paying, again, half that and seeing a pretty solid payback. So we don't need to sell 1 million homes a year to do pretty well. We can, if we're doing 5,000 homes a year, we're a pretty big company. And so when we look at the smallest version of our market, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, just homes using fuel oil today, they're 3.1 million just in those 3 states. If you look at the broader northeast of the US, there are 5.5 million homes just using fuel oil. And then we're building as a country 1.2 million homes a year. So, for us, when we think about expansion, we're going to do it really deliberately, location by location. We think our next move will be to go with production home builders. We're very lucky to have Lennar as one of our investors, and we're in very active conversations with them about a few possible locations, likely in the Mountain West. And then, yeah, there are possibilities like franchising. We're also very interested in air source heat pumps. We're not only about geothermal. We think that as long as we're electrifying heat, we're going in the right direction. So, we're looking to bring new ideas forward. But we'll see. I think the luxury of this market, and I think it's true of climate markets in general. I think with software, the mindset tends to be winner take all because you're building a product that if it's the best one, you derive an advantage that no one can keep up with. But in something like this, I think there are going to be many winners. I think there can be many companies that are electrifying. The market is so big, the opportunity is so big, and we just want to be one of the winners. And I think we've got a pretty good chance to do that.
Yeah, and there's probably also a good chance around some of the things that you're working on from a hardware side that, might become part of your solution that you're able to sell into other companies that are doing this. And like I know on the West Coast here in Canada and BC, I believe the government is starting to implement starting in 2030 a new building code and regulations. And so, I think that's probably going to be incredibly favorable for Dandelion in terms of building codes are going to change and what you install. The idea of putting in an oil or a fuel furnace is probably going to be, I'm assuming, removed from a lot of building codes into the future, which will open up even further market share. So. Is that kind of part of the strategy as well? You mentioned already new homes, but have you started to do any of those projects where it's from day one?
So We haven't yet, but I anticipate that's going to be a big part of our business next year, and we've got nothing we can announce just yet, but some pretty good partnerships that are starting to come together. But to take the larger point, I think the macro factors are so large here. So like, I think something maybe people don't always think about is, natural gas utilities. So like when there's this huge natural gas infrastructure in Canada and the US. And when utilities build those natural gas pipelines, even if it's to an individual home, they expect to earn a rate of return on that for 30 to 50 years. None of them believe that's going to happen anymore. Because even if you are super bearish about our ability to respond to climate change, and I would say that a lot of utilities might fall in that category, but even if you're super bearish about our ability to respond to climate change, you don't think we're still going to be using natural gas in 50 years when it's 20% of our carbon output. So they don't want to make those investments because they think they're bad investments. So they're eager also to push us towards electrification. And so that's why I think that whether it's new homes or old homes being retrofit or changes in building codes, the pressure is unavoidable. Like the dam is breaking, and electrification is going to be, I think, what everyone does going forward. It's just going to happen, one state or province or one city at a time. But I think if we look back in 20 years, we're going to see that, oh yeah, we've just stopped building fossil fuel infrastructure, and it started somewhere around 2015.
And we didn't touch on it. We obviously keep talking about sustainability, and this is renewable energy. So when people are thinking about switching to geothermal, like how much of an impact does that have to our environment? I know obviously that'll differ between an electric heat pump system, depending, of course, where that person lives and how that electricity was generated. If it's through a coal plant versus a hydroelectric dam, is going to have those differences. But in general, what type of energy savings do you typically see?
Yeah. So the number we use, the number the industry uses, it's called coefficient of performance, and the coefficient of performance is for every unit of energy you put in, how many units of heat do you get out? The typical air source heat pump is a magic trick. For you put 1 unit of energy in, you get 2 units of heat out. For geothermal, you put 1 unit of energy in, you get 4.5 units of heat out. So so it is the most efficient way to heat a home. It is also 30% more efficient on cooling. The precise savings you're going to see are going to depend on your fuel costs and how much energy your home is using in general. And then the impact of that, you're exactly right to point out that where you are, I'm guessing the power is more hydro, so it's totally clean to go electric. You'll have a little more footprint if you're using coal power in a different region. But the bottom line is the efficiency. At 4 units of heat for 1 unit of energy put in, your energy bill is gonna go way, way down.
Yeah. Well, Michael, this kind of brings me to the end. I could probably chat about geothermal heating for a long time with you, but a lot of this, my marketing and branding of this podcast is, a little bit of a nod to the Lorax book by Dr. Seuss, which is our cautionary tale about what can happen to the environment if we overuse it. And so, for people listening, what would be your advice to entrepreneurs or people wanting to get involved in the climate or sustainability space?
Yeah, I think a few things. I think one is not to fear the physical world, that if we want to really impact sustainability and the environment, we're going to have to change physical things about our world. And that's an incredible opportunity for entrepreneurs. So much entrepreneurial energy has gone to software, and with amazing results. We need that same energy coming to the physical world. And the physical world is fun. You get to actually see the results of what you've done. And there's an incredible gratification in that. And so I would say that, as folks think about it, embrace that and embrace that, that's going to have some implications for what your business model is and who your funders are. But it's also going to be the way to have the biggest impact in terms of how we consume and use energy.
I'm almost done a book called How the World Really Works by Vaclav Smil, and he touches a little bit on just the amount of work that we need to do. And I think, this is what you just kind of said. And just in regards to like how you look at scaling is the physical things, the things that we make, the things that power. These are things that often, one solution that we kind of build over, a year on a computer is not going to solve. And we do need all of these tools, and the physical world needs to change, and there's massive opportunities. So thank you so much for joining. For people that are listening, how can they find out a little bit more about Dandelion or find out more about yourself?
Yeah, so come visit us at dandelionenergy.com. And you can find out all about what we're doing there. We have lots and lots of content on geothermal. And if you want to find me, I'm less interesting, but you can find me on LinkedIn.
Well, Michael, thanks so much for joining us, and congrats for all of the early success. And we will be cheering you on and looking to get this some more pipes into the ground, not for oil this time, for heating and cooling via geothermal. So thanks again for joining us, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Marco. Really enjoyed it.
This podcast is co-produced with The Brand is Female. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Someone Like You. And if you did, please share this. We're a new podcast, and I would love it if you could share it with a family member, friend, colleague, work colleague. Share it on Slack, whoever you do. Just share and spread the message of these incredible brands. Please also support these type of companies. They're doing the hard thing, and the hard thing often takes a lot of people to get on board. And don't forget, please subscribe on the platform of your choice and give us a rating and review. I'm Marco Pimentel. Thank you for joining us today. For more information on Someone Like You, you can find us on Instagram at Someone Like You Podcast, with all the links to the podcast, our website, and more information about the brands that we feature. Thank you again.